You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means we are back once again. Time to roll out the crypto red carpet, see what's cooking there in the land of all things crypto derivatives. Yes, it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE, optionsinsider.com, as well as from the network upon which so many of you folks are mainlining these days. Hope you had a great trading week. Kind of an interesting one last week. A lot going on towards the end of the week and over the weekend, indeed, and coming into the start of the week today. So we have a lot to get to on the show today. Of course, you like what you hear, this, anything else you hear on the old network, drop a like, a star, a comment, a rate, review. All that fun stuff in aggregate does help the legion, and they are literally legion these days, the legion of new people continue to discover the content. Of course, if you want to go above and beyond, first off, make sure you're listening to the full network. Start there. If you're not subscribed to the full network, man, you are missing out. I know a lot of you on this show still a little bit, let's say, a little bit newer to the game of options. If that's the case, you should be listening to the full network. A lot of great educational content that will lure you to the dark side slowly but surely. And then, of course, if you want to go above and beyond that, you think you're ready to graduate to the next level, theoptionsinsider.com/pro, the place to go to get access to exclusive pro Q&A sessions with some of the best minds in the world of options and derivatives, including quite a few dovetailing into the crypto realm these days, as well as, of course, options oddities at the end of the week every week, wrapping up the week with some crazy, unusual activity. If you don't come away from that show with at least a couple of trades to look at and go, I might want to investigate that for my own accounts, then you're just doing it wrong. Myself and the Rock Lobster, when we do that show, we come away with too many trades we want to do. It's a dangerous show, but a fun one nonetheless. Of course, all the archives, live streams, this, everything else we do. Awesome giveaways, exclusives, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. P-R-O, the place to go to learn more. As we go to learn who's joining us on the old Crypto Rundown program this week, I'm pleased to welcome on 2 weeks in a row. We got a streak going. Our old buddy, Mr. Greg Magadini, the Director of Derivatives over there at Amberdata. Mr. Greg, welcome back to the program, sir. What a difference a week makes.
No kidding. Well, thank you so much for having me on. There's a ton of activity, a ton of action and volatility. It's It's an interesting market for sure.
Yeah, it's popping off. So let's get to it. A little bit of the old Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. We're talking about the big dog, which is Bitcoin, a wee bit smaller, a wee bit littler than it was this time a week ago, listeners. And yeah, if you've been listening to the show for a while and thinking, I think I have a handle on the trend out there right now in the crypto market, it's mostly up across the board out there. The end of last week came along just to shake you out of your complacency. Maybe you were talking about the halving on the show last week. Maybe you're thinking heading into the halving, it's going to go naught but up. Nope. End of the week came along last week, and it shook up everything, shook up the broad equity markets, shook up volatility, and indeed, and yet another data point that shows that crypto is not an uncorrelated asset class at the end of the day, also shook up the crypto market quite a bit as well. Bitcoin taking it on the chin as we're coming into the start of the show now. 63,678. That's where it was right when we commenced operations on the show here. You might notice that's a wee bit lower than it was this time last week. We were just a tick below 72,000 this time last week, 71,902. We did get lower over the weekend. We got down almost breaking 60K again, about 61,000, a little bit below it, 60,919 to be precise. The high looks like it came pretty much right before or right after our show last week, 72,715. That was about all she wrote for the week last week. The rest of it was pretty much a downside. A lot of it, of course, driven by this growing unease, shall we say, to put it mildly, over there in the Middle East. Very rarely do we get these early warnings of global geopolitical attacks and rifts, but we did last week, and that really spooked everyone across the board. Crushed equity markets, crushed crypto, drove vol into high heaven. And now coming and started this week, we were looking like maybe the worst was behind us. Markets were starting to rally. Things were starting to rally. And then now just getting sucked back down again. As I'm looking right now, the broad equity markets are off over 1.25%. The S&P, NASDAQ threatening 2%. That's after being up pretty firmly around 0.5% earlier in the session. So that's nearly a 2% swing. Just in the S&P, we've all learned by now, past its prologue, it's going to suck down crypto with it as well. So a lot to unpack. Greg, you picked a good one, or maybe a scary one to join us on this week. Maybe you want to go hide your head under the covers. But instead, we're here talking about crypto, sir. What caught your eye in this insane action over the last week, sir?
Yeah, no kidding. So the way that I like to think about this, we were talking about this in our newsletter for the past couple of weeks, that there is really this trade-off between the fundamentals and the market positioning. And so what I mean by that is that, the fundamentals of the demand for the Bitcoin ETF, the halving that's occurring here in 5 days, those were kind of really strong, and the market was really well positioned for that. So you could see a lot of leverage built up in the futures market, a lot of variance risk premium being built into the options market. And over the weekend, especially as we had an attack between Israel and Iran, the crypto market sold off and really kind of cleared out a lot of that positioning. So if I look at the basis week over week, today we're about, call it 8%, but about 3 weeks ago we were in that 25% handle. So that really shows me that everyone was really long, market crash, kind of resets the whole footing of the market. But from a fundamental picture, if we look back at the Ukrainian-Russian war when it kind of first broke out, that was a really bullish moment for gold, a bullish moment for Bitcoin. And then again, with inflation kind of surprising to the upside, there's this argument of inflation and real rates. But inflation theoretically is a really good thing for something like Bitcoin that isn't subject to debasement. So in my mind, even though we've had sort of this massive pullback, which can get worse, there's still kind of this short-term environment. But in the longer term, it's not like we had a degradation of the fundamentals. We've actually had more of a construction of the fundamentals. And really looking at the futures market and the options market really gives us a good idea of how are they positioned in that market ahead of time to understand if we're subject to vulnerable points like we've just had and kind of get these deep pullbacks.
Yeah, just on the show last week, Greg, we were kind of debating whether the halving was going to live up to the hype. We kind of thought no, we didn't know it was going to happen as quickly, maybe, that we would see the rug pulled out from under us. But sounds like you're still not abandoning ship out there just yet. Of course, you're right. 5 days from the halving, you think that gravitational force would be sucking markets up a little bit at this point. But apparently it can't overcome the geopolitical rift that is growing out there right now. Listen, let's see how all this, as Greg mentioned, how all this is impacting the Bitcoin derivatives market from a vol, from a skew perspective. We'll start in vol and work our way out, shall we, listeners? Let's start in the weekly vol, because interesting stuff going on in the near term, obviously, in Bitcoin right now. And, interestingly enough, we're kind of treading water on that front. Last week, we were at about a 72 on the 7-day vol, and this week, about a 71. So pretty much about the same level, which is kind of interesting, given all the evolution we've seen over the past week out there in Bitcoin. Where we are seeing a little bit of a change, is a little bit longer term vol, which is interesting enough, coming in a little bit. 75.5 on the show last week on the 1 month, 30-day vol, which again is the more standardized volatility metric. Coming in to start the show today, 68. That might surprise you. But then again, remember, Bitcoin is not VIX. It's not the S&P 500. People have this strange notion in their minds that when assets go down, vol has to go up, just because that's the way it works in broad equities. Remember, the skew is different in crypto as well. And the broad equities, puts are going to be bid from an implied volatility perspective out there, and the calls are going to be offered. In the Bitcoin realm, not exactly the case. Calls usually have quite the bid. You start breaking down into that put wing, vol can actually come in. So people always get surprised by that, but I guess they don't listen to the show if that's the case, because we've been pointing that out for some time. And vol coming in a little bit again this week at a 68 on the 30-day vol front right now. So coming a little over 7, about 7.5 points. 180-day vol, where are the 6-month holders hanging out right now? They were nearly an 80 this time last week, about a 79. Coming in and started the show today, a 75.5 there as well. So coming in about 3.5 points on the longer term vol. Still frothy, still effervescent, to put it mildly. You're not going to find many assets that have a 75 vol 6 months out. Bitcoin still very frothy, but coming in a little bit. Greg, anything out here catching your eye in terms of vols, or anything you want to add on that notion that people always expect, okay, asset class goes down, therefore vol goes up, sir?
Yeah, definitely. So that's a great point. So vol is really a reflection of panic. And so when we have sort of a geopolitical risk and people panic and basically sell assets, like we saw in stocks and saw in crypto last week or over the weekend, that's a panic moment that makes vol go up. But in crypto, there's this other moment where, let's remember, most of the world is not invested in crypto. Almost everyone is not invested in crypto. It's still a very small segment. And so when you kind of see, you hear through the grapevine, or you see some of your friends, do really well in crypto, well, now you have this fear of missing out. So it's this other kind of stressor. And so what causes people to just panic buy either crypto, which causes the realized vol to go crazy, or options to get some exposure, which causes the implied vol to go crazy, or Delta One derivatives, which causes the basis or the cost of levered longs to go crazy. So all those things can happen when there's kind of a FOMO reaction. So that's why you can see vol go both ways in crypto.
That's why I like doing shows like this, man. I love broad equity vol, Greg, and it's fun. And, we love shows like Volatility Views. You've been on that show as well. So everybody likes their good dose of equity vol. VIX still is the big dog in the room, the 800-pound gorilla at the end of the day. But you know what? It's nice to talk about different things too, Greg, from a vol perspective. It's refreshing, dare I say it. And crypto certainly falls into that refreshing category, not just following the old patterns, but I won't say marching to the beat of its own drum, but moving a little bit differently, which is kind of intriguing as well. Greg just kind of broke down some of that outlook. Let's see how that's reflected right now in the skew. Same deal. We'll start near dated and work our way out. You can probably figure by now, if you've been listening to the show for a little bit, that the near dated skew, which shows where the options sentiment is focused right now, where the concerns are laying, probably has swung to the dark side. And if you guessed that, you would be correct. The weekly skew right now went from almost a positive 3 on our last show, about 2 3/4, all the way down to about a -6 as we kicked off the show today. So swinging nearly 9 points to the dark side, which again, we almost broke through 60K not too long ago. Not exactly surprising, that the skew would be pointing a little bit to the dark side. 30-day skew reflecting something similar. It was positive about 3.25 on the show last week. Coming in to start the show today, -2, so swinging over 5 points to the dark side there. Are we going to give up the ghost longer term as well? Remember, the long-term holders, they love to just buy upside like it's going out of style. Are they still doing it? Well, the answer is yes, but maybe a little bit more muted than this time last week. We were at about 4.25 positive this time last week. This week, a little bit shy of 3.5, about 340. So coming in about 0.85 on the week. It's not quite a full point out there, but still giving up the ghost a little bit. Greg, anything catching your eye out there in the Bitcoin skew this week, sir?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a couple things to look at, both in the term structure part of it and the skew part of it. So if I look at the term structure of the skew itself, obviously skew is very negative in the short dated stuff, call it 7 days till expiration. No big surprise there because we're kind of having a downside jump. But if we go all the way to about 60 days till expiration, we actually flip to that positive, meaning calls are more expensive. 25 delta calls are more expensive than 25 delta puts. And if we go out to 180 days, this has really been consistently positive through almost all environments since the beginning of 2023. So there's really kind of this pricing in the longer dated stuff that there's going to be more upside volatility. Now, I actually think that's I used to not think that was justified because like the FTX, Three Arrows Capital, and all that stuff created a year in 2022 of negative spot vol regime. But since 2023, we're really kind of in this median positive spot vol regime, meaning on average, when spot goes up, vol goes up a little bit more than when spot goes down. And so there's that component. But the other really interesting component is if you look at the far dated options, let's remember these are future options. And so now that we've just had the basis completely compress on this pullback and all the leverage long traders essentially puke, well, once we start getting back into the bullish environment, and I don't know if that's here yet, it might be lower, but once we start establishing new leveraged longs, well, the basis is going to come back in, which means that the long dated stuff is really going to capture a lot of that. If I look at the 6-month basis, for example, about 3 weeks ago, that was trading $8,000 above spot for Deribit futures. Today, it's about $3,000 above spot. And so there's about 5K of compression. So if you own those sort of those long dated calls, basis comes back in. Well, not only do you have delta exposure from spot prices, but you'll also have delta exposure from the basis increasing. And so to me, that's really interesting, and it actually justifies, a nice little premium on those call options.
I like it. Fascinating stuff. Listen, let's see if things are fascinating out there in some of the other products you folks like to sling in your securities account for a little bit of a bite of the old crypto apple. Let's get out to Bitto. And man, if you were holding some Bitto, it's been a rough week. It was nearly 4 points higher this time a week ago, 3.9 points to be precise. They're continuing to come for it right now, 27.60 right now. So again, giving up nearly 4 points on the week. So hopefully if you owned it, you captured that nice, I think it was $1.10 dividend recently. So that makes some of that a little bit easier to take. I don't think we're getting that hefty, juicy dividend this time. Again, the month is young. Anything could happen, but usually you need to see some nice aggressive upside action for those really healthy dividends to come in from the Bitcoin futures. We talked about that before many times. Bitto right now averaging about 102,000 contracts a day. Still pretty hot, hotter than it used to be just a few months ago, but that's down another 12,000. I got a feeling today, though, we might be breaking that mold. Already 104,000 contracts on the tape. In terms of vol coming in a little bit down to about a 70. Still very juicy, but Bitto vol kind of whipsaws all over the place. I mentioned 104,000 contracts on the tape. Looks like a lot of people are slinging the April 30s today, Greg. Over 7,000 of those going up at prices anywhere from about 40 to about 21 cents, it seems like, out there. It looks like a lot of people are bailing on those. I don't know, April 30s. That's a bit of a way to go by the end of the week, Mr. Greg. What do you think? You like yourself a little bit of the Bitto April 30s for, 40 cents with about 4 days to go? Does that float your boat, sir?
I don't think that pays. I wouldn't want to buy those.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to sell them either. So I think it's one of those I just watch from the sidelines.
Yeah, that's a challenging one out there. I guess if you're going to sell them, if you do it against a little bit of Bitto, that could help offset some of this dark side you folks are feeling this week. But again, if you've been running with BITO for a little bit, you're still doing pretty well over the last few months, even if you're giving back quite a bit. Right now, it's still the big dog out here in BITO, 103, almost 104,000 of the Jan 30s. Obviously not looking quite as robust as they were this time a week ago, but then again, they're going all the way out to Jan, so they got some time in their back pocket. Mr. Greg, anything else catching your eye out here, Mr. Greg, in all things BITO this week, sir?
Yeah, to me, the BITO is really interesting for those longer term plays to really kind of capture those kind of price flattening effects from the dividend, capture those effects from the contango in the futures market. Obviously, there's just a regular basis it suffers from, but also I tend to think that rolling costs are people trade against rolling people. If we know that there's rolling happening, there's some good trades to do against that. So I think there's a little bit of bleed from that. There's some management fee bleed, so on and so forth. So to me, using BITO as an instrument is really interesting if you give it enough time for those effects to kind of play out. And then you could trade some Bitcoin against it and really kind of get kind of try to capture some of those dynamics.
Yeah, certainly a fascinating one. Like I said, a lot of different forces at work there, the management, the drag, such as it is sometimes. Other times, this hefty dividend that they throw into the mix as well, which really tends to gum up the works, but in a very interesting way. All sorts of fun things going on in the world of BITO, including some more volume out there again, which makes it fun, I know, for all of our options fans out there. Another one you folks like to sling out there is Mara coming in. This one taking it on the chin again as well. 15.25, down 3 points exactly from our last show. It looks like it's bumping up against pretty much the lows that it's been at for the last few months. I know it was in the range of between 15 and 30, which sounds ridiculous to say out loud, but that's where it was, bouncing between 15 and 30 for quite some time for the last few months. January got down to 16, then back up to 31 in February, then back down to 19 before rallying again up to about 22 and a half, and now looks like getting back down to 15 and change. Still up from about looks like about $8 it was back around Halloween of last year, so still more, almost doubled from there. But intriguing stuff out there. And in terms of volume, 273,000, that is the ADV, coming down a little bit from our last show, down about 23,000. About 176,000 contracts on the tape today. Looks like the big dogs today, 11,000 of the April 16. So a lot of near-dated playing going on out here. Again, those are about $0.75 out of the money. Those are all opening. So if you like those, listeners, April 16. So let's look really quickly and see what prices those were trading for out here. It looks like 40 to about 65 cents was the range. So only a few days to go. The trend is not your friend right now as Mara continues to erode. But intriguing stuff out there. Also saw the April 17. So I guess if the 16s are a little bit too close to the fire for your blood, how about 10,000 of almost 11,000 as well? So it could be a bit of a vertical, but not opening on both legs. So opening on the 17s as well, and opening on the 17 halves, about 7,100 times. So all sorts of upside palooza going up out here this week. Listen, you like any of those 16s to 17 halves? Somebody did, to the tune of, looks like about 28,000 contracts combined just in those three alone. In terms of the vol, it's about a 120, so still extremely frothy, only down about 4 points. And again, this thing's moving, so kind of hard to dispute that. And the top size position out there in Mara right now from an overall OI perspective are the June 30s, 3 O's. So again, we have the 30 strike dominating the tape in both BITO and in Mara. Intriguing stuff out there, listener. Mr. Greg, I know in the past you've kind of watched Mara from the sidelines a little bit. It's a very intriguing product, but obviously there are other things going on in Mara aside from the price of Bitcoin. Anything catching your eye out there this week? And are there any other ETFs or ETPs in the crypto space for the Bitcoin side that are catching your eye this week, sir?
For the Bitcoin side, nothing in particular. I'll jump back to that from the ETH side because I really think that Grayscale ETHE Trust has some sort of opportunity coming out here. And then Mara, to me, Mara's kind of interesting. I almost view it like one of those VIX ETPs where like this thing just kind of wants to go down and it has moments where it just goes really high up. So the vol is just nuts. So I think there's probably some structures to be done there, just on the vol side, expecting a lower price drift. Again, we talked about this last time. I'm not completely well versed on the fundamentals of miners, but my understanding, if the mining supply, issuance supply drops by 50%, and if prices don't go up by 100%, then the revenue goes down a little bit. And so that's kind of something to keep in mind as well.
And there are many other things to keep in mind, so let's explore them now. A little bit of the old altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, where we explore all the action outside of the big dog, which is Bitcoin, except for right now when we break down the top 10 from a market cap perspective. Kind of hard to omit Bitcoin from that conversation, even if it is a wee bit smaller out there. But man, the fascinating stuff to me has been certainly the bottom half of this top 10 of late. Just what a slugfest, what a war it is for those, let's say, spots 8 through 10 every week. Just different assets going at it week after week to hold on to their spots or carve a new spot. Let's see what's going on out here this week, listeners. Coming in at number 10 this week, it's our old pal Cardano, falling a few spots at about 16 billion exactly for the number 10 spot. So that's what it costs you to break into the top 10 this week. 16 billion. Nothing to sneeze at, listeners. That's roughly 2x what it was not too long ago. Number 9. People are wondering, where's our old friend Doge? Here it is, number 9, 22.3 billion. Oh, that's Greg's favorite of all the crypto assets we're going to talk about here today. Most of his holdings, if not all of them, 100% in Doge. He loves it. Can't get enough. He's probably sad that it's fallen to number 9. And then coming in at number 8, we were just talking about this last week. This Toncoin, ticker symbol TON, just lighting it up. You folks cannot get enough of this thing. 23 billion worth of market cap. So kicking Doge and Cardano to the curb. It's got its targets firmly set on XRP at number 7. It's got a little bit of a ways to go, but I guess if this trajectory continues, Toncoin shucking off the whole crypto sell-off, saying we're coming for you folks out here, including number 7, XRP. Man, XRP taking a little bit of a hit as well. 49 cents when we ran these numbers. That's off a bit from its 62. It seems like it's been locked at forever now. 27 billion for XRP. And the number 7 spot out here, listeners, number 6, it's our old friend, USD coin. Number 5, it's Solana, coming back down a little bit from its lofty heights. It's almost at 200 not too long ago, 137 when we ran these numbers earlier. So yeah, quite a bit to the dark side here. 61 billion worth of market cap. Number 4 is BNB, 82, almost 83 billion. Number 3 is Tether, 108 billion worth of market cap. Number 2, it's ETH, 370 billion. And number 1, the big dog, still got a T handle, looking a little bit smaller this week though. It's about 1.25 trillion for the big dog, which is Bitcoin. But Greg, I think the question everybody has on their lips right now that they want to know, how much Toncoin did you buy since our last show, sir?
I don't own any Toncoin. I'm a little behind on the altcoin game, but I still think there's money to be made there from people who are really into these altcoins and do research and join discords and use protocols and all that stuff. There's a lot of edge there to be had. So I don't want people to shy away from altcoins. There's not options on it. I'm less interested.
All the crypto kitties just turned off the show en masse the second you said you were out on Toncoin. So we lost them all. So we'll see if we can work to re-engage them here on the show. So go out to our number 2. I know for a lot of you, including Greg, it is number 1 in their hearts. Spoiler alert, I was joking about the Toncoin, listeners. It's ETH, looking a little bit smaller again this week than it was last week. Just a little bit shy of 3,700 on our last show, listeners. 3,696, 3,092 when we commenced operations at the start of the show. I'm sure if I re-racked it now, it'd probably be even lower. That puts it down a little over 600 handles on the week, listeners. Of course, we did get lower. Again, Saturday was a rough time. All these bad headlines, all this bad news was popping off. You know, we talk about in a lot of our other shows, weekend risk. We saw it play out quite literally this week. So if you hear us talking about that term, what does that mean, weekend risk? You saw it play out quite literally this weekend, listeners. Taking ETH down to about 28.62. That was the low. The high came right around our show this time last week, 37 and about a quarter. So quite the range. Not quite 1,000 handles, but pretty darn close, around 900. All that a long way around to saying the vol in ETH managing to stay a little sticky. It was a 76 on the show last week on the 7-day vol, 78 and a quarter Before I even get to the vol, I threw you a curveball with Toncoin. I know your favorite is ETH. What's been catching your eye out there? And the number two in a lot of people's hearts, ETH, sir.
Yeah, so ETH has a lot of interesting aspects to it. I think the first one is once we get past the Bitcoin halving, then what are the new headline events for Bitcoin? I think the headline events for Bitcoin become behind us, and similar headline events for Ethereum start to take hold. So I think May 31st is the deadline for the ETH spot ETF. That probably gets kicked down the road. But again, that's going to be similar to the Bitcoin story, but for Ethereum. Then the Bitcoin halving story, which is the supply constraint. Well, Ethereum has that same story, but better with EIP 1559 and the burn. So to me, like the attention starts to turn to ETH. And if we look at the ETH Bitcoin price ratio, this is at recent highs, like 3 year, recent lows for ETH, recent highs for Bitcoin against ETH for the past 2-3 years. So ETH is relatively cheap to Bitcoin now. And so that's another interesting story. Another interesting story is the historically tight spread between ETH vol and Bitcoin vol. So if we still get alt rotation and alts have higher beta than Bitcoin, well, vol right now is historically cheap in terms of the spread over Bitcoin vol. So I think there's kind of a lot of nice things lining up for a massive ETH play. That doesn't mean that the demand just magically pops up because the pricing is quote unquote favorable right now. But if we do get that demand turn, there's really some good opportunities to be made. So there's great trade structures to start looking into, and great plans to be made around this type of pricing.
Let's see how those plans are shaping up on the ETH vol front first. Let's go out to the weeklies, listeners. And that weekly vol remaining stubbornly frothy, all things considered. It was a 76 on the show last week, a 78.25, so managing to gain 2 points, while ETH vol, I should say Bitcoin vol, on the near-dated front coming in a little bit. So as Greg was kind of pointing out, that relationship between ETH and Bitcoin vol, a very fascinating one to watch, certainly over these next couple of weeks, heading into the halving and coming out of it. A 30-day vol, a little bit different story there. We had a 77.5 this time last week, 71.25 this week. So coming in over 6 points on the week. So again, very much tale of two vol dynamics. The near dated, the weekly stuff as all this crazy geopolitical turmoil is wreaking havoc in the markets. And then of course, a little bit longer term, maybe a little bit calmer, saner heads are prevailing. Go out a little bit farther, all the way out 180 days, 6 months, listeners, vol coming in there as well. It was an 80.5 on our show last week, 77.65. So coming in almost 3 points on the 6 month vol front as well. Greg, you just kind of talking about the ETH Bitcoin vol dynamic. Anything else catching your eye out there on the ETH vol front this week, sir?
Let me see here. So right now the ETH spread, just kind of touching on that point real quick, it's only about 2 points wide in the farther ended stuff. And really only the short-term stuff is like 20 points wide. So the current beta for ETH is definitely being priced higher than Bitcoin, but quickly converges back to nearly even. But if we look at stuff such as the 25 delta skew, that's going to be a little bit steeper to the downside in the front end as well, in terms of just in response to that beta metric. And so those are kind of the things that I'm seeing, but nothing that tells me it's a screaming opportunity in terms of deviations, except if you want to hold some of that long-term vol.
Let's see if you see any screaming opportunities popping up on the skew front, shall we? Let's start near dated and work our way out as we are wont to do, listeners. Last week, as you might imagine, things were looking a little bit frothy to the upside, about 3.5 points in the positive direction. This week, swinging all the way in the other direction, and then some negative 7.5. That puts us down exactly 10 points on the week. Again, not a surprise. We saw crypto assets pretty much across the board take a drubbing over the weekend. So not a surprise that the weekly skew would swing pretty heavily to the dark side. Is the same thing being found on the 1 month skew? And the answer is yes. We were almost a positive 3 on the 30-day skew last week, about 2.65. Coming in at the start of the show today, a negative 4. So swinging over 6, almost 7 points to the dark side on the monthly skew as well. And a little bit longer term, that's where, again, the calmer, saner, cooler heads typically prevail. They're at a 4.5 this time last week. This week, about 3.65, so coming in almost a full point there as well. Greg, I know you spent a lot of time watching the ETH skew out there. Anything catching your eye as we look from the weekly all the way out to 6 months, sir?
Really kind of the same dynamics as as Bitcoin for the most part between the skew dynamics as well. So 6 months out, again, still has a little bit of that premium to it. I think that premium is pretty interesting for the same reasons of getting sort of a basis built up. And so that also plays in sort of that rotation narrative play. So there's definitely some stuff to be done in the longer dated stuff, anticipating basis build up again. So yeah, I think it's really kind of the same dynamics that are for ETH as Bitcoin that I think you can capture those opportunities interchangeably.
Where the dynamics have shifted quite a bit is in Solana. Listeners, spoiler alert, moving a little bit out there. On our last show, 181, so threatening 200 to the upside. This week, 137 and a half. When we kicked off the show, down a whopping 43.6 handles on the week. Oh my goodness, man, they have come for Solana. Obviously, there was a little bit of froth built into some of that speculative upside, but still, they really clipped the upside wings over the course of the past week. Let's look at the vol, listeners, and 7-day vol, as you might expect, looking a little bit juicier this time than it was last week, listeners. We're at a 118, a whopping 20 points higher this week, 138. Again, we were talking about the skew and a lot of different crypto assets earlier in Bitcoin. Doesn't mean if you have a nigh on apocalyptic move like we saw over the past week that vol isn't going to pop, and that's pretty much what we're seeing out here across the board. 30-day vol was at a 114 this time last week, 127 this show. So again, a lot of juice to be found out there. We don't have really the longer term data yet for Solana. It's still really starting to propagate the options chains over there on Deribit. So as it starts to make its way out, we'll get a little bit more longer term data. Same deal for the skew. 7-day skew was positive 9 this time last week. It was all about the upside. This week, a whopping negative 8. So swinging markedly in the other direction. And I would not surprise if it's not even lower. It probably was intra-week. Just a lot of downside pressure on Solana, obviously. 30-day skew, weirdly enough, it was almost a positive 20 this time last week, about 18 and a quarter. This week, not swinging to the negative, which I guess you could read as a bit of a bullish sign, but all that positive bias is gone. It's swung pretty much back to zero. It's pretty much flat right now. So interesting evolution. I'm looking forward to seeing more volume go up in Solana so we could read a little bit more into these limited tea leaves right now. Mr. Greg, I know Solana's been on your radar and then kind of off your radar, and then almost by definition, it kind of has to be back on your radar again these days just because of these ridiculously outsized moves we've been seeing out there of late. What's catching your eye as they are pretty much chopping Solana off at the knees this week, sir?
Yeah, no kidding. A lot of volatility in Solana for sure. What's really interesting is if I look at like the realized volatility cone of Solana going back the past 4 years, for example, really the distribution of a realized volatility for say 30 days, the median's about 110 vol with an interquartile 25% to 75% of observations coming in between 90 to 136 vol, and really having a bottom or minimum 30-day vol of 53, and then craziness of 292, really when we had that implosion of FTX, and also when we have a rally from very low prices. So what's really interesting to me is like now that we've set in a recent high, and now we're kind of finding a sort of recent bottom, there's kind of a defined range that prices will, that you can trade against. So meaning that, if you're betting that vol is going to come down by selling some sort of call structure, that $200 level is something that's going to be sort of interesting. We'll see how it reacts when we get back there. And then once we kind of figure out where this local bottom plays out, it gives you kind of a nice structure to start, putting consolidation trades on and looking at price levels that shouldn't be trespassed in order to kind of create some risk management rules around as well. So to me, we're right now 140 vol when the median long term has been about 110, leans me to the side of vol probably comes down after we bottom out here.
I know I've asked you this before, but I'm curious. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are curious. Again, you kind of talked about the somewhat harrowing recent history of Solana, all the things going on from FTX till now. I know you kind of had washed your hands of it. You're kind of just watching it. Has all this price action of late, has it drawn you back in at all? Maybe a little bit of a nibble, either on the underlying side or maybe on the growing option side, Greg? Or are you still kind of watching from the sidelines?
Yeah, well, I think this is really interesting. This is truly the story of the higher beta asset that like Ethereum has failed to materialize. So what we hoped Ethereum would be to Bitcoin, Solana is actually being to Bitcoin and ETH. And so to really get some extra juice to the crypto bull market, an altcoin like Solana makes a lot of sense because it's really performing great in percentage terms, even despite this recent pullback. And so to me, just from a higher beta allocation perspective, that's really interesting. There's obviously, since the market cap's so small, there's more room to run higher. There's also sort of the negative side of Solana where we have like transactions failing or the chain is down, just kind of things that are unheard of in Bitcoin and ETH land. So that's kind of interesting. And then obviously it's just a crazy high volatility asset, which makes trading vol much more, it gives trading vol a lot more opportunities. So yeah, I think Solana is pretty interesting. As far as bag holdings, for myself personally, I'm still in Ethereum and Bitcoin.
Not opening up the bag to Solana just yet, sir. But maybe if these options numbers start to grow, maybe a little bit of a nibble, maybe sell a put here, maybe buy a vertical there. What do you think?
Absolutely.
All right, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the options here. Unfortunately, no options on XRP, even though the price, you could argue, is pretty much an option if you could buy it for most of our US-based listeners. Looking a lot lighter this week than it was last week. 62 cents last week, 49 cents this week. So as I was just lamenting that XRP kind of stuck in a rut for a long time, unfortunately now moving in the wrong direction. Doesn't really participate in the big move to the upside, but it goes along with the move to the downside. That's got to be frustrating for a lot of you people in XRP who have been waiting for years now for something to happen. Down another 13 cents this week. I do feel for you folks out there. It's been a rough road in XRP over the last few years. Doge, 20 cents on the show last week. Tony, almost 20 and a half cents this week, 15 and a half cents. So coming in about a full nickel on the week. Litecoin, 103 and 3/4 last week, 76 and about 3/4 this week. So a big move out there as well. Cardano, 61 cents last week, 44 cents, down 16, almost 17 cents. Again, why it's kind of fallen to the bottom of our top 10 right now. Polkadot, $9, pretty much even, 660 on the show this week. So coming in about 240 there as well. And everybody's favorite, Shiba Inu, a whopping million zeros, 288 this week. A whopping million zeros, 21. Greg, we broke down most of the altcoin universe. Any other fun and or intriguing altcoin burning a hole in your wallet this week, sir?
Yeah, actually, so Matic and XRP Deribit just actually recently launched options. We're just going to get that data in pretty soon. So those two will be interesting markets to analyze from a vol perspective as well. Obviously, those are small markets. So as we see liquidity build up, it'll be interesting to see how those develop. So I think that's pretty interesting. And then outside of that, obviously, I love the DeFi landscape a lot. There's really some interesting DeFi protocols out there. Vertex and DYDX are really interesting. Delta One DeFi venues. Lyra is an interesting optionality DeFi venue. And so I think there's kind of some Avo is another interesting DeFi option venue. And there's a couple of more coming online. Shoals, DeFi options, Gravity, DeFi options, Premia, DeFi options. So I think all those venues are just worth exploring. And then lastly, I do think it makes sense to download a Coinbase wallet, to use the base chain to be active in that space, because I just wouldn't be surprised if there's a Coinbase base airdrop of some sort. It just makes sense to me. And the risk of, doing a few transactions is basically nothing. So might as well just do it.
Yeah, you've been on this Coinbase airdrop for a while now. An intriguing one. I'm sure I have a Coinbase wallet somewhere on one of my devices. I'll have to go fire it up and put a few transactions through so I can get this hotly anticipated Greg airdrop coming soon, sir. But I like what you're just putting down there. Shoals. I like that. Naming alone. I might have to throw some trades on that one just for the naming convention. I like it. If you're an options stalwart listeners, you know where that comes from. And then, the other one that kind of catches my ear out there. I've heard this for a while. It still kind of cracks me up when we're talking about options on XRP, Greg. The underlying falling to 49 cents this week. Do we need a robust options market on a 49 cent underlying? I don't know. These are the questions. What would be fascinating is if XRP was banned in the US, but you could trade the options here. There we go. That'd be a backdoor way to trading XRP. Would you do a long-term underlying substitution for around 50 cents, Greg? And just forget the underlying. So, I love it. That should be a fun poll. If XRP options go live and you could trade them, would you trade them? Who's going to pay like a dime for an out of the money call when the thing's 49 cents? I don't know. It cracks me up, but that's a conversation for another day. Listen, unfortunately, that music means we've come to the end of the conversation on this week's Crypto Rundown. But if you're noticing any interesting trends out there across the crypto landscape from a vol, from a skew, from an overall underlying perspective, it doesn't have to be just the derivatives. I know we focus a lot on the derivatives here, but if you want to talk some underlying trends, maybe you're one of these huge Toncoin hodlers. You want to explain to Greg why he's missing the boat. Reach out to us at Options on most of the major social media platforms. Questions at theoptionsinsider.com. That also works. Send your hate mail directly to Greg, and I'm not taking that for you, Greg. That's all you. Intriguing stuff out there. And Greg, if all the Toncoin hodlers want to get at you, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us on Twitter at GenesisVol. You can find our analytics at pro.amberdata.io. And then you can find our weekly newsletter at amberdata.substack.com.
And stay tuned for the forthcoming Toncoin newsletter coming out next week, Greg. Is that when it's coming?
Exactly.
There you go.
Exclusive ton coverage.
Exclusive. Breaking. You heard it here first. Ton newsletter. If it keeps climbing the ranks, Greg, we might have to discuss it more here. The audience demands it at the end of the day, Greg, and we are not but tools of the audience at the end of the day. Ask me why I bought a ton of VIX 13 puts, Greg. It's because of our listeners. They made me do it.
No.
I blame, yeah, exactly. It worked out pretty well. So I blame all of them. The cursed VolViews audience, Greg. They are a demanding bunch out there. That's going to do it for us on the old Crypto Rundown this week. Not going to do it for us on the network this week, obviously, though. A lot more coming back at you. Got pro Q&As on the old docket tomorrow. Who's going to join us? Head on over to the Pro. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to get access to a little bit of pro Q&A action. Wednesday, of course, coming back at you for all you educational folks out there. Options Boot Camp. Still the big dog on the options educational front. You folks love that show. Have so for pretty much over a decade now. Hundreds of episodes out there. Check out Options Boot Camp. Thursday, of course, our doubleheader of the option block with our friends over there at SIBO, as well as coming back at you this week in futures options with our friends over there at CME. We do touch on crypto on that program as well. So if you're intrigued by crypto, I encourage you to check out This Week in Futures Options. Friday, of course, the much ballyhooed volatility views, as well as after that, exclusively for our pro folks, we come back one final time, a little bit of the old options oddities. Then we're back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.